I thought it was going to be a peaceful night. Just me, my backyard, and a few swings at golf balls to unwind. It's an old habit of mine, a ritual to clear my head. The stars were out, a faint glow against the dark sky, and the suburban silence was comforting. My house was nestled in one of those cookie-cutter neighborhoods where everything was predictable and secure. Or so I thought. I was halfway through my routine, the rhythmic thud of my club meeting the ball and the satisfying arc of its flight, when I heard it. A rustling sound from the far end of the yard, where the light barely reached. I paused, straining to see through the darkness. It was then that I saw him. A figure, shrouded in shadows, moving slowly through my backyard. My heart skipped a beat. This was no neighborhood cat or stray dog. The figure was too deliberate in its movements, too deliberate in its intent. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady, but it wavered with a hint of unease. The figure didn't respond. Instead, he stopped and turned towards me. For a moment, our eyes locked, though his face was hidden beneath a hood. Then, without warning, he picked up a golf ball from the grass and hurled it in my direction. I ducked instinctively. The ball whizzed past me, striking the wooden fence behind me with a resounding thud. Panic surged through me. I grabbed my phone and sprinted towards the house, my breaths coming in sharp, ragged gasps. As I fumbled with my key, the intruder's silhouette flickered in and out of the light. Another golf ball whizzed past my ear. Finally inside, I slammed the door shut and locked it. My hands were trembling as I dialed 911. "There's someone in my backyard," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "He's throwing golf balls at me. Please hurry." The dispatcher's calm voice was a small comfort as I waited. The minutes felt like hours, every creak of the house amplified by my fear. I peeked through the window blinds, trying to catch a glimpse of the intruder, but the yard remained empty. The sound of sirens finally cut through the silence, and I rushed outside to greet the officers. I led them to the backyard, my flashlight casting long shadows on the grass. They searched the area thoroughly, but there was no sign of the intruder. No golf balls scattered around, no traces of disturbed earth, nothing. The officers assured me they'd patrol the area and advised me to stay vigilant. As they left, I stood alone in the darkened backyard, feeling a mix of relief and lingering dread. I was safe, but the unnerving feeling of being watched lingered. I couldn't shake the thought of that stranger's eyes, dark, empty eyes that had fixed on me with an unsettling calmness. I went back inside, locking every door and window with a heightened sense of caution. The golf balls I'd been hitting earlier lay untouched, now seeming ominously silent in their container. I felt lucky to have escaped unharmed, but that fleeting feeling of safety was overshadowed by an unsettling awareness that my quiet, predictable suburban life might have just become something much darker. As I settled into bed, I could still hear the faint rustling of the wind outside, and it sounded like something was lurking just beyond the edges of the light. I turned off the lamp, trying to force myself to sleep, but the darkness felt heavier than it ever had before. The sun was high, and the sky was a clear, brilliant blue, perfect for a day on the golf course. My best friend Emma and I had decided to spend the afternoon on the green, unwinding from our hectic week. We had heard about the peaceful charm of this public golf course, nestled just outside of town. As we arrived, the pristine fairways and well-kept greens looked exactly like the serene escape we had hoped for. "Look at this place, Sarah. It's gorgeous," Emma said, her voice filled with awe as she took in the rolling landscape. "I know, right? Let's get started before it gets too crowded," I replied, adjusting my cap and grabbing my golf club. We started off with light chatter, our laughter mingling with the sounds of distant birds and the soft rustling of the breeze. The game was just beginning to get competitive when I first noticed him. A man, dressed in a dark jacket and hat, standing at the edge of the woods that bordered the course. He was watching us intently. "Emma, Do you see that guy? I asked, nodding toward the woods. Emma glanced over and frowned. Yeah, he's been there for a while. Maybe he's just waiting for someone? I tried to shrug it off, but the uneasy feeling in my stomach lingered. We continued with our game, but the man's presence was like a shadow hanging over us. Every time I glanced over, he was still there, though his position seemed to change slightly, as if he were moving with us. As we moved to the next hole, I noticed that the man had disappeared. Emma and I let out a sigh of relief, though my sense of unease didn't quite dissipate. We resumed our game, but every so often, I caught glimpses of him reappearing at different spots along the course. Each time, his eyes seemed to follow us with an unnerving intensity. Sarah, this is starting to freak me out, Emma said, as we approached the final hole. Her voice was trembling slightly. Agreed. Let's finish up and head back to the car, I said, trying to keep my tone steady. We wrapped up our game quickly, our focus now more on leaving than on our scores. As we walked back to the parking lot, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the course, which only added to the growing sense of dread. When we finally reached our car, the fear became palpable. There, standing eerily close to our vehicle, was the same man. His face was hidden beneath the brim of his hat, but the way he stood, motionless and almost too calm, sent chills down my spine. Emma, get in the car, now, I whispered urgently. Emma's eyes widened in fear as she quickly unlocked the car door. We both scrambled inside and locked the doors behind us. My hands were shaking as I started the engine, the sound of the engine roaring to life, providing a brief sense of safety. As we sped out of the parking lot, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The man was still standing by the car, watching us drive away. His figure grew smaller and smaller until he was swallowed by the darkness of the forest. Who was that guy? Why was he following us? Emma asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. I don't know, I replied, my heart still racing. But I'm never coming back here again. The golf course, once a place of leisure and relaxation, now felt tainted by the chilling encounter. As we drove home, the mysteries of the man's identity and motives lingered in my mind, unanswered and unsettling. The bright, sunny day had given way to a creeping unease that would haunt our thoughts for a long time. Story 3. Have you ever had one of those nights where everything seems normal until suddenly it's not? That's exactly what happened to me at the mini golf course last night. Let me tell you about it. It was a crisp autumn evening, and the mini golf course was bustling with families and friends, enjoying the last hours of daylight. The colorful neon lights of the course glowed cheerfully against the darkness, casting playful shadows across the whimsical obstacles. My friends and I, eager for some fun, had decided to spend the night at the course, playing through the quirky holes and laughing as we tried to outscore each other. Come on, Sarah, it's your turn, shouted Jake, my friend, as I fumbled with my putter. I'm coming, I called back, adjusting my grip. As I stood at the edge of the green trying to line up my shot, I noticed a woman standing near the edge of the course, watching us intently. She looked out of place, her clothes were disheveled, and her eyes seemed too focused on us, almost as if she was waiting for something. I dismissed it at first, thinking she was just another player lost in the game. I made my putt and turned to watch my friends, but the strange woman had moved closer. I barely had time to register her presence before she reached out and grabbed my arm with a sudden tight grip. Hey, I exclaimed, pulling back. I'm sorry to bother you, she said, her voice shaky and filled with desperation. I'm lost. Can you help me? I was taken aback, unsure of how to react. Her eyes were wide and there was an unsettling urgency in her tone. Sure. What do you need? I just need a ride. Please, she pleaded, glancing around nervously. I'll explain everything once we're in the car. My friends had wandered off to the other side of the course, leaving me alone with this stranger. Despite my reservations, I felt a twinge of sympathy for her. Okay, fine, let's go. We walked to my car, the woman closely trailing behind. Her presence was unnerving, and I kept glancing over my shoulder, trying to gauge her intentions. When we reached the vehicle, I unlocked the door, and she immediately slid into the passenger seat. "Thanks so much," she said, her voice now oddly calm. "I really appreciate this." As I prepared to start the engine, I noticed her eyes darting around the car. Before I could react, she suddenly lunged for the keys, trying to grab them from the ignition. "What are you doing?" I shouted, my heart racing. I yanked the keys out of the ignition and shoved them into my pocket. The woman's eyes widened in shock, and I could see the shift in her demeanor, from desperate to something more sinister. Her hands clawed at the air, reaching for the keys. "Let me out!" I yelled, my voice trembling. I threw open the door and jumped out of the car, slamming the door shut behind me. My pulse was pounding in my ears as I locked the car from the outside. The woman tried to follow, but I backed away quickly, my mind racing with fear. I ran back to the mini golf course, looking for my friends. I found them just as they were finishing their game. They were laughing and chatting, completely unaware of what had happened. "What's wrong?" Emma asked, noticing my pale face. "Let's go," I urged. "We need to leave now." Confused, but trusting my urgency, they followed me out of the course. As we drove away, I glanced back in the rearview mirror. The woman was nowhere to be seen, swallowed by the night's darkness. We left the mini golf course behind, the lights fading in the distance. The incident left us all shaken, the woman's identity and motives remaining a chilling mystery. As we drove home, the fun and laughter of the evening seemed like a distant memory, replaced by an unsettling sense of dread.